Hey YouTubers, it's Dansky. So in this tutorial we're going to be looking at creating a vector version of the iPhone 6 in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so to get started we're going to go up to File and Place, and you're going to select your image of the iPhone 6, and you can get this very easily anywhere online. So once you've placed this into your document, we're going to zoom out a little bit, and holding Alt and Shift, just drag a copy over here. And we're going to be using this as a kind of reference point to check that ours is heading in the right direction. And the original version over on the left, if we just take the transparency down to 50%, then we can lock this layer, and we'll just call this Guides. Then we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call it iPhone. Okay. So now let's start creating the shapes that make up this iPhone. So with our rectangle tool, we can just draw a rectangle. You can fill it with any color now. I'm just going to use gray. And we just need to create the outside shape. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this as a square-edged rectangle first. And then once you've created that, you can go up to Effect, Stylize, down to Round Corners, and then just tick the preview box. And then you can adjust the radius until it matches that of the iPhone 6. So somewhere around there. Let's just have a look. Perfect. And we could just drag that one out to one side. So now there's another band here running around the inside. So let's look at creating that as well. So we've already got this one here, so we can hold Shift and Alt and drag across to create a copy. And then what we can do is just with this corner point selected up here, we can hold Shift and it will scale down to a central point. And if we select this one here and hold Alt, it will scale it vertically here, but it will also do it equally on the bottom. Okay, so if I undo and redo, you can see it doesn't just lengthen the top, it does both edges. So really handy. So holding Alt, you can see it does it from both sides rather than just extending one side. Okay, so let's make sure that this just matches what we've created. Okay, and we can just fill that with a darker grey for now, and then just drag that inside our other shape. Okay, so that looks great. The radius looks a bit thicker in this corner, so if we select the darker shape and go to the Appearance palette, we can select Round Corners, tick this on, and we can just decrease the radius slightly. And in doing that, it means that we have a consistent width running around the edge. Now what we can do is just select both of these shapes and then click the horizontal align center and the vertical align center just to check that they're all perfectly in the middle. So they're both central to one another. Okay, now let's create a few really easy elements. We're just going to create the camera. So very easy, just drawing a circle, holding Shift to keep it a perfect circle rather than an ellipse. So I'll do this one here, and then we can use the rounded rectangle tool for this bit here. Okay, and that'll do for now. Again, if you want, you can just select these two shapes and then click horizontal align center. If I just move them off, you'll see what it does. It just aligns them centrally to one another, so that's brilliant. So let's just group all of these for now. Object and Group. Let's make them a much lighter grey so they stand out, and we can just drag these over here as well. And you'll see it snaps right to the center because we have our smart guides turned on up here. Very handy. Okay, so now we can do the screen, just to get all the kind of major elements out of the way. So we'll do the outer screen first. No, let's do the inner screen. So we're just using the rectangle tool again. There we go. And then what we can do for this is we can also add a stroke. So let's pick a black. And we can make sure in the stroke palette that we add this to the outside edge. And the corner of the stroke, we want that to be rounded. And let's just increase the width a little bit. So 2 points, that looks about right. And now we can drag this shape over. Now we can look at creating the home button. So we can create a perfect circle. Let's just turn off the stroke so we have a fill only. We'll just pick another grey there for this one. And we're going to create the outer part of the circle first. Okay. So now we're going to go to Edit, Copy, Paste in Place, and holding Shift and using the arrow keys, just tap this one out to one side because we might need that in a moment. Now with the main circle, we can swap the fill and the stroke and align the stroke to the inside and just increase the weight until it looks something like that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, and we're just going to move this copy out to the side as well, just because we may need that in a moment. And we can select the main one in the middle, go to Object, Expand. We're happy with the stroke width, we don't want to change that anymore. Okay, and I can just shuffle this one down so we can see what we're doing when we add the gradient. Okay, so for the gradient, we're going to go with the dark grey up here, we're going to go through to the white in the middle and then out to another darker grey. So let's give this a go. Select the gradient palette with your circle shape selected. And we'll just click it and it'll apply a gradient. So first of all, we want this to run from top to bottom rather than left to right. So just enter 90 degrees and it will rotate the gradient for you. And now we're going to pick a darker grey and just drag that onto the black instead. Maybe just a touch lighter. Then we're going to move this white right up into the middle, and we can actually enter 50% as the location, just so it snaps it into place. And then this same grey over here, so we can hover over the darker grey and holding Alt, we can drag out and drag that all the way to the other side. And you'll see very quickly we've created this gradient effect that's similar to the above. We've got a few adjustments yet. So on this one on the above, there's a lot more white in the middle and ours isn't as bright. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the white in the middle and then drag out these points here. So then again you can enter this in. So let's just key in 30. And for this one, we'll key in 70. There we go, that's looking a bit better. And you can adjust your gradient to your liking and you can adjust the angles a bit more. Maybe let's just throw ours off a little bit. Something like that. So it's slightly off, it's a bit closer to the photo of the iPhone. Okay, now we can just tap that one back in place. And we'll keep these for now, but we could just hold Shift and use the arrow keys to tap them out of the way. It's handy to keep shapes like this because if you need to mask anything in future when you're adding some kind of blurs and textures and bursts of light, you can use those shapes as clipping masks, and it does come in handy sometimes, so it's always good to keep them. Okay, so we can drag our home button over to our main composition now. So it sits there, and I'm going to turn this darker grey one just so it's starting to come together a bit more. I'm just going to select some different colours here, so let's pick a lighter grey, and then I'm going to make the screen white. Brilliant, so we can see it starting to come together. Okay, now let's do a bit more work on this part here. So you'll see here you've got these grey bands that run around the back of the iPhone. So only this part is visible. So we're just going to use the rectangle tool to create these. Let's make these pink for now, just so we can see them. And we'll drag them over to ours and just bump the width up. Okay, and I'm just going to drag one over to the other side as well, and just make sure that snaps in place. And that can stay there for now. So the next part we need to do is look at getting this inside band running around our iPhone, okay? Because at the moment we just have a big grey outline. So let's select our outline. We're going to go to copy, or edit, copy, edit, paste in place, and holding shift and the arrow keys, just shimmy that out to the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to work on this outside of our main composition, and once it's completed we're going to remove this grey one here and then slide this back in underneath. So actually what would be easier, I'm going to move this over to this side just so it's a bit closer and I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's try and swap the fill and the stroke. Okay, so we've got our grey outline there. Then we're going to go to edit, copy, edit, paste in place. Swap the fill and the stroke again, except we're going to have a lighter grey now. And then holding Alt, we're going to bring this down, like so. And then in the appearance palette, just decrease the radius again, so the width is consistent all the way around. So effectively how we're going to create this, all these different bands with lots of different rounded rectangles. So we're going to go to edit, copy, edit, paste in place, and do exactly the same again for the next one. Ooh, a little bit off there. Just make sure you get the right width, let go, and that one's a little bit darker, isn't it? Okay, and we've got one more, so edit, copy, edit, paste in place. Oh, no, I think I've done one band too many then. There we go, let's delete that last one. And then just make this one a bit darker. There we go. Okay. So you can see here we've got a bit of a glow, kind of like almost like an inner shadow running around the edge. So let's create that. And I'm going to show you now why it's handy to keep copies of shapes. So if we select the outer shape here and go edit, copy, and edit, paste in place, and then holding shift and the arrow keys, we'll shimmy it out to one side. What we're going to do is increase the stroke width, align it to the inside, and then we're going to go to Object, Expand to complete that shape, and then go to Edit, Blur, and Gaussian Blur, and just take the preview on, and let's make that 2. Okay, so we're going to do the same again now. Edit, copy, edit, paste in place, and we're going to shimmy this out to the right, and holding shift and using the arrow keys, we know that it's going to line up exactly in the right place. And we can swap the fill and the stroke, and with this grey one on top, select both of these, go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And what will happen is it will keep the blur effect, but all the way around the edge we'll now have our clipping mask applied to it, so none of the blur will extend beyond the outside edge. Okay, so now with this selected, we can hold shift and just tap it back into place. and then go to Object, Arrange, and Center Back. And then we can probably just decrease the transparency on that one. If we just hold Shift and tap it out again, and double click on it, and double click again, we can go into the Appearance palette and edit the Gaussian blur still. And I might just decrease that back down to 1. Then come back out of these groups. So by double clicking an element, you can go into it and edit the properties again. Then we can just hold Shift and just tap that back into place. And this outline, we can make this a little bit lighter now. So let's select our stroke, just make that a bit lighter. Okay, I'm just going to edit that blur just a touch more. Okay, and come back out of it. And again, tap it into place. That's a really good reason to use the Shift key, so you can move elements out, you can edit them, and then you can put them back in. And I'm actually going to make this just a little bit lighter still. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now we've got that done, we can go back over to our main composition. We can hit backspace or delete to get rid of that. Select all of this on the right, we'll group it together, so Object, Group, and then we'll drag this all the way over to the left until it snaps in place, and then go to Object, Arrange, Center Back. And then I'm just going to select this part here, and I'm going to make this white now. Just the main body of the iPhone. Okay. And we've got some little highlights here, so let's work at creating those. We only need to create one, remember, and then we can just apply that to the other side. So we're using the pen tool just to create these highlights. So just create the same shape. Something like that. And we'll make that grey for now, just so we can see it while we're working with it. And it fades out at the top and the bottom. Okay, so what we're going to do is, on this iPhone here, I just selected white at the minute, but I'm actually going to select a different gradient. So let's just drag that one off there. So we want white, but we're going to have it go to a very slight off-white. Okay. We want it to go vertical, so let's just check 90 degrees, and you can reverse it here, so the darker colour is on the bottom. I say darker, it's very, very slight, but you can see here that this glow is actually white, so therefore this background colour must be a touch darker. In fact, it may even be lighter than that. So I'm just going to edit that even more. In fact, I'm going to create a new swatch that is even closer. So 246, I'm just going to copy that. Just so it's a tad lighter. And then I'm going to drag that onto the gradient. Okay. So now we can go back to this little highlight here. And in the gradient palette, we can have it going from white to white, and we'll put another white in the middle, so we'll just select 50% there, and on the left we'll change the opacity to 0, on the right we'll change the opacity to 0, and we'll just drag these points out. So again, we'll select 30, and for this one we'll select 70. Now let's just move that on top to see how it looks. Okay, so that's not quite right at the minute. Let's try turning it 90 degrees. Okay, so it's quite hard to see this gradient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a really bright colour instead of the white. Okay, so I can see that the gradient there is really off. That's not quite what we were going for. Okay, that's a bit better now. And this is a really useful tip, is using a big bright colour when you're working with gradients. So let's bring these in from the side. I'll bring that into 20. And this one can be 80. You can enter the percentages if you're insistent on precision. And then we can just drag the white back onto the red. And then if we drag this over to the left, this should look just about right on our version. Okay, a bit more white needs to come down here, but that's absolutely fine. And I'm just going to rotate that a little bit as well. And then just drop the transparency to 90%. Maybe a bit more actually, just down to 70. Let's see how that looks. Just adjusting the position. Okay, so it's a bit closer on that left edge. So something like that. And then we can just repeat that on the other side. So if we select it and then holding Alt and Shift, we can create our copy, go to Object, Transform, Reflect along the vertical axes, click OK, and we can just drag that one in place as well. It's a bit closer to the edge. Perfect. Okay, so we've got one on each side now. Next, we're going to look at creating the buttons on the side. Okay, so we can do this using the rounded rectangle tool. We can just drag to create a button. And we can go to Edit, Object, Expand Appearance, and then just delete these bottom points. And then using the Direct Selection tool, just select these points here. And go Object, Path, and Join. And it will join that into a shape. Let's make it a green. Okay, so perfect. I'm not sure what all that attached to it is. Very strange. Let's try that again, just in case it's doing something strange. Okay, so we'll create our shape, go to Object, Expand, and then just select those anchor points. And then using the Direct Selection tool, just select the two endpoints and go to Object, Path, and Join. Strange, not sure why that isn't working. For some reason it's not working, but if it doesn't work, that's not a problem. You can just select the pen tool, hold Alt on one anchor point, and then just left click on the other and join it that way. Okay, so we're just going to create these other buttons up here. So holding Alt and Shift will create a copy. And we'll create a copy again up here. This one's obviously a bit smaller, so we're just going to shrink it down in size. And just make sure it's lined up to these other ones. Okay. And then we can drag these out so they snap to the edge of our iPhone. And they've got a gradient in them. So it goes from like a very dark grey at either end through a lighter stage in the middle. So remember to set the opacity back to 100%. We'll put that one right in the middle, and then we'll just hold Alt and drag out the darker gradient, and then switch the angle to 90 degrees. Okay, and we're just going to push these right up into the corner. So we'll make that one 90 and this one 10. And we're going to make these buttons just a bit smaller as well, so we can select them both and just drag them down in size. Just make sure they're lined up still. We can just select these ends here with the direct selection tool and use the arrow keys to tap up and then tap down, just so they're both the same size and they're in the same position as on the actual iPhone itself. And then just select all three buttons and line them up so they snap in place. Perfect. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, and just drag this out to the side. And I'm going to give this one a different gradient, okay? So what we're going to do now is we'll get rid of one of these, and we're going to turn the gradient back to 0. Swap it round so it's coming from this side, and then bring this back into the middle. No, just a little bit off. Something like that. Let's say 70%. And I'm going to pick a lighter grey, and then I'm just going to shift click that back into place. And I'm going to set the blending mode in the transparency palette to multiply. Because we've got these little points either end, but then we have a darker gradient through to a lighter one. So let's shift that back out again. What I'm going to do with this one is move these right to the edge. Okay, I can't move them any more than that. It won't let me take those out anymore. Okay, so I'm going to use a lighter grey then. Make sure this one's set to white. There we go, that's a bit better. Now I can shift click that back into place. Okay, so they look a bit closer to these now. And what I can do actually is select both of these, go to Object and Group, and then holding Alt and Shift, just drag it up. Shift it out, get rid of the green one, and then shift it back in. Let's have a look at the top one. Okay, very similar effect. So I can just apply that to the top one. So Alt and Shift, and I'm just going to drag it down in size. And then using the direct selection tool, just select these endpoints and just tap those up. just so the size is consistent. We'll get rid of our green one and just select all 3 buttons and then snap them to horizontally align right. And then just make sure that they're not cutting into the iPhone itself. So something like that. Okay, because we're zooming in so far, that's probably 1 pixel there, so we can't move that one. But when you zoom out, it's something that is very, very hard to notice. If we were creating the iPhone on a bigger scale, then we'd have more flexibility around these small details here. Okay, we can select these pink bits and we can just make those a light grey as well now. Okay, and we've got the camera. So we've got a bit of blue and black in there. So let's just go ahead and do that now. So we'll ungroup these up here, select the camera, go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place. We're going to use the Scale tool to then bring it down, holding Shift so it stays in the middle. Let's just check the size of the camera. Okay, and then I'm going to select the outer circle. I'm going to add a stroke that is 0.5 in weight. I'm going to add it to the inside, and it's going to be a darker colour. Let's have a look. In fact, something that I will do now actually, because this one that is for colour matching is all the way over here, I'm now going to unlock this layer. I'm going to make this transparency 100% and then lock it again. We've created all our shapes now, so the only reason we make it transparent is really just so we can see what we're creating on top of it. Now we don't need to do that anymore, it's just about getting the colours right. We can go ahead, make this back to its original colour, and then actually start applying colour of our own and just matching to this. So I'm going to thicken this outline up a little bit. Okay. And when creating the camera, I think what I'm going to do is holding Shift and using the arrow keys, I'm going to tap this over here. So I can create the camera right next to the original one and then move it back once I've finished. So let's create the weight of the stroke, make that nice and dark. And then the gradient for the camera is a very, very dark grey through to a slightly lighter one. And it's on a bit of an angle, so let's try 45. No. 90, but then we can reverse it. So you can fiddle around with this until you get the angle right. I'm going to make that colour a bit darker. Much better. And then the blue in the middle. So let's see if we've got a blue up here that we can use. Okay, that'll do. And we can give this an outline as well. Make it 0.7. And then I'm just going to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, and bring that down for the very centre of the camera. Swap the fill and the stroke, and then get rid of the blue stroke. So this looks quite basic from this distance, but once you zoom out, it's very difficult to really notice that it looks too different. If you've got a higher res version of the iPhone, you can go into a lot more detail on this, and you can edit the camera until to the very last detail. But I think that's fine for now. So if we select that, we're just going to hold Shift and using our arrow keys, tap it back into place. And for these last two bits, we can see they're just grey in the middle with a black stroke, so that's nice and easy to do. So let's pick our grey. And then with them both selected, let's just enter a stroke of 0.7. Line it to the inside and make sure the stroke is set to very close to black. I might make that just a touch darker on the fill actually. There we go. Then the outside part of the iPhone, the very outline here, I'm just going to make that a touch darker. So now it's really just about going over and refining, and I'm going to increase the weight to 1.5, maybe 1.25. And then just bring these in. So you can see it's really just a case, once you've created all the main elements, it's just a case of going through and just making any final tweaks and touch-ups where needed. Okay, so we've created our iPhone. There's obviously more you could do to this, but I think for the most part we've created something that is looking fairly similar to what you see on the right. Okay, so now we can select our guide layer and switch that off. Then we can select our iPhone, go to Object, Group, and there we go. We've created a vector version of the iPhone 6 in Adobe Illustrator. I hope that was helpful. If it was, leave me a little like and let me know what you thought in the comments below. And I'll see you in my next video.